So when you look at the big three console manufacturers being Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo right now, there is definitely some stark head-to-head competition between companies like Sony and Microsoft, as I think you can argue that they see themselves as direct competitors, whereas Nintendo kind of exists in their own bubble, assisting arguably a somewhat different or supplemental gaming market than exactly the target audience of Sony and Microsoft. And with that, one interesting approach that Microsoft is taking to the market more as of lately is a broader play our games on any device you have at any point in time, as opposed to Sony's more console exclusive restrictive style of selling their games. And in today's video, I want to break down some brand new comments from Phil Spencer himself, who of course is the chief CEO of Microsoft, and discuss why we may be headed for a somewhat beneficial partnership between Microsoft and Nintendo for the end consumers going forward. What's up, Nation? If it's your first time on the channel, make sure you join Sunbro Nation by subscribing below, hit the like button on this video if you enjoy it today, and make sure you turn on your bell notification icon so you're kept up to date with all the newest gaming news. As I mentioned, guys, today we are discussing some rather interesting comments from Phil Spencer in a recent interview that is being picked up everywhere online, and really a broader conversation of the state of the gaming industry as a whole right now, because it is a very interesting time when you zoom out and you see the success of all of the competitors in both the console space, in addition to how we are seeing mobile evolve, because while probably many of us here on the channel are more hardcore console-based gamers, there is actually a much broader market emerging in the mobile smartphone community, with some of the biggest revenue drivers actually coming in from those platforms now. And while I am not the biggest mobile game player myself, you can't argue that we are at a very interesting time with how the industry could potentially shift going forward into a more mobile focused, or play where you are whenever you want. Yes, we are seeing some of that with cloud streaming, and while I don't think that technology is mature enough to be a viable option, I think Nintendo was genius, and the reason we are seeing their strong success in this current generation of gaming is because they were kind of ahead of the curve with that play your games wherever you are, however you want to experience them, with the hybrid form factor of the Nintendo Switch that is now fastly approaching 6 years of being sold and available on the marketplace. And I think we are starting to see more and more consumer demand for flexibility and options on how they experience their games. And while Sony and Microsoft tend to compete head to head, we have seen over the years Microsoft and Nintendo specifically start to form more and more of a partnership and a working relationship together in the gaming space. And I mean, we don't even have to talk about anything in the distant past. Just look at the fact that a deal actually came together between all parties involved, Microsoft, Nintendo, and most likely MGM, to re-release GoldenEye. And yes, both Microsoft and Nintendo will be getting it on their platforms. They had to have direct communication in a boardroom with documents signed that came to that conclusion and that deal. And it even turned out that Nintendo is walking away with the version that has online play exclusive to NSO, while Microsoft will be having GoldenEye as part of Rare Replay with some other enhancements, native widescreen, higher resolution, all of that good stuff, but missing the online play component, which is arguably one of the biggest draws for that game. And so I personally think we are going to see a very different strategy going forward from Microsoft, being less focused on the console exclusive stuff, and all they are going to care about is whether or not you sign up for Game Pass or are just playing a Microsoft branded game in some way, shape, or form, regardless of how you're playing it and on what screen you are playing it on. That is not important to them. They want you to somehow be feeding into their revenue stream with the software that they are creating, probably ultimately even potentially focusing less on their own hardware and just caring about whether or not you're a Game Pass subscriber. And I think that with that strategy, and you can clearly see some of the comments we're about to read through from Phil Spencer directly, it is only going to be a benefit as a Nintendo gamer at the end of the day, because in years past, we have definitely seen some major mainstream franchises missing from the Nintendo Switch, and you can argue that's somewhat because of hardware limitations, but I also think it's been somewhat of an afterthought to bring these mainstream franchises over, and it sounds like now as we approach closer and closer to the pending merger of Activision Blizzard that we could be seeing some really exciting prospects of major franchises making it to the Nintendo Switch for the first time. And to get on the same page with exactly what's been said and why this is in the news cycle, let's quickly hop over to Nintendo Life, where they have a nice detailed article typed up with what Spencer has commented on himself directly. Xbox boss Phil Spencer would love to see Call of Duty on Nintendo Switch. Our intent is to treat COD like Minecraft. Activision's latest Call of Duty game arrives this week, and while there's no Nintendo release, there's been some conversation from the Xbox boss Phil Spencer about bringing the popular first-person shooter series to the Switch. Speaking to the Wall Street Journal recently, Spencer mentioned how Microsoft's plan for the series when the Activision Blizzard deal goes through could be to treat it like Minecraft and make it available on as many different screens as possible, including the Switch, via The Verge senior editor Tom Warren. Call of Duty specifically will be available on PlayStation. I'd love to see it on the Switch. I'd love to see the game playable on many different screens. Our intent is to treat COD like Minecraft, Phil's quoted saying. Phil's comments follow on from CNBC's interview with Microsoft President Brad Smith earlier this year, who also mentioned how the American tech giant would like to bring Call of Duty series to Switch if the acquisition went through. One of the things we're being very clear about as we move forward with the regulatory review of this acquisition is that great titles like Call of Duty from Activision Blizzard today will continue to be available on the Sony PlayStation. We'd like to bring it to Nintendo devices. We'd like to bring the other popular titles that Activision has and ensure they continue to be available on PlayStation and that they become available on Nintendo. Now listen, you can clearly read these comments and think that yes, this is most likely all just PR speak, because obviously Phil Spencer's main job right now has to be to get this merger to actually officially clear and be approved for purchase by Microsoft for nearly $70 billion for the acquisition of Activision Blizzard. That is the biggest number one priority they have. So whether or not they stick to these kind of comments and commitments around bringing all these games and these libraries to multi-platform existence and maintain them as multi-platform titles, that could all be fluff until ultimately the deal is secured and years after the contracts run out that they just flip the script and go exclusive to Xbox and exclusive to Game Pass. We will ultimately not know what that really looks like until we approach that point in time. However, one thing I would point out is that so far their strategy with Game Pass has very much been any platform it is on, and as many platforms it is on, the better. We are starting to see TV integration where you can launch Xbox games directly on TVs that support it. We've seen the little streaming device that was spotted on Phil Spencer's back desk behind them that would arguably undercut some of their console sales if it was something like $50 or $99 to get into that. They just want as many consumers on the Xbox ecosystem and on Game Pass specifically as possible. And I do think, objectively speaking, if they can pull it off in a profitable manner, which it has also been claimed that Game Pass is profitable for them right now, and they continue to grow it, I do think it's something that is a very consumer-friendly service, and I say that as somebody who prefers to physically collect games. However, there is a large chunk of games that I will never go out of my way to actually buy at a $60 or $70 price that I do boot up on Game Pass on my Series X and get a full experience that I would have never had or taken a second look at anyway. And in a perfect world, I would love to see Nintendo have some kind of restricted version of Game Pass, because there's too much overlap if they just did exactly Game Pass on the Switch, unless their rates were crazy high in the percentages that Microsoft paid to have it on the Switch. I don't see that necessarily making business sense for them to fully launch Game Pass on the Switch, but maybe just the Microsoft exclusives or titles that you cannot buy through the eShop. It might make a lot of sense for Nintendo to go that far into a partnership with Microsoft and have the best end consumer experience on many games that for $15 a month, which that price will most likely go up just like every other freaking subscription that you've ever signed up for has seen a price hike. I have the YouTube Premium Family Plan that's going up right now. So we're seeing price hikes everywhere in subscriptions, and there is downsides to this strategy and to this model. But as a gamer who's grown up with the classic collection of going out and buying every single game, and now being in this environment where sometimes I just want to try out a game and see if it's for me, and all I have to spend is my time on the download and not additional money besides what I'm already committed to for the $15 a month for Game Pass Ultimate, I don't think it's a bad thing for consumers to be able to experience more games at the end of the day. And if it's a game that you really fall in love with and you want as part of your collection, you can even then go show additional support to the developers and pick up the full copy at full retail price. So I personally am not opposed to Microsoft's strategy at all here, and I do think that if they keep true to their comments right now and put games like Call of Duty on the Switch, it's only a win for consumers at the end of the day. And I say that as somebody who's not the biggest Call of Duty fan. I may or may not hop into some of Warzone 2 or Modern Warfare 2 as it fully ramps up. All my friends are super into it. I just don't play those type of games match in and match out over and over, and yet I could still see the compelling argument that that game should be on Nintendo hardware at some point in the future. Sure, it won't look as impressive graphically, but having the option to play it would be very nice, especially if we get something like new Nintendo hardware. And then you have to think about all the other franchises that Microsoft may bring back with Activision Blizzard once this merger is completed, because whether you love or hate Phil Spencer, he does seem to be, at least in my outside looking in objective opinion, to seem to be a gamer at his core, and he's spotted playing games online with his user ID. It doesn't feel as much of a Jim Ryan situation, business numbers only, but with some of the gamer mentality in a leader and a CEO, it seems to be a good thing at the end of the day for maybe some classic franchises that he's brought up in the past, like Guitar Hero making a big return, like the Tony Hawk series coming back, and we saw Activision Blizzard dissolve Vicarious Visions into a Blizzard support team very recently, and we should have had Tony Hawk 3 and 4 remake to look forward to. That was in the works, and that's now off the table. I'm hopeful that stuff like that comes back in a big way and comes back to Nintendo platforms once this merger ultimately goes through, and it's just a win-win for the consumer at the end of the day. I want to hear from you guys at this point in the video, all your personal thoughts and feelings around Xbox's strategy here with how they're marketing Game Pass. Are you a fan of the service personally? Do you think that a more limited version of Game Pass would actually make sense on the Nintendo Switch? And do you think that we will see all of the Activision Blizzard major franchises supported on Nintendo hardware once this merger does indeed go through? Or do you think this is more PR speak, and if anything, Microsoft locks it down to more of an exclusive model after this merger is closed and done and contracts have run out? And which Activision Blizzard franchises that they were responsible for in the past would you most want to see come back in a big way? I'm definitely all the way on Team Guitar Hero and Team Tony Hawk. I really want to see those franchises come back and have new installments and even have some remasters of classic ones. I am all here for it. But regardless of your thoughts and feelings on everything we talked about today, I do look forward to hearing from you all in the comments down below before you leave the video, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around this topic. Go watch yesterday's video next if you haven't already, which is on screen right now. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.